Hi everyone. All right, this is going to be a short video about grant funding. So one of the things that we talked about in class is obviously about getting technology to be able to enhance your physical education program, whether that be to do better assessments on your children or to have children learn about their health in a better manner. So using heart rate monitors, getting them to understand what moderate to vigorous physical activity is. But the reality is that using technology in our classes oftentimes means that we need money. And sometimes our administration isn't really willing to give us money. And so this PowerPoint is going to go through a little bit about how to maybe obtain some grants or at least try to apply for grant funding. So the first thing that you need to remember when you're thinking about trying to get funding for something is that you need to figure out what the end goal is. Like, what is it that you want, and why is it that you want that? And there needs to be a good reason for why. So if you say like, oh, I want a projector because everybody else has one, like that's not essentially a good reason to want a projector or an iPad or a computer or whatever it is that you're trying to integrate into your course. So you need to figure out what the end goal is and how it is going to help you be a better teacher, how it's going to help your students, which is essentially the end goal, right? To create healthier students for a lifetime. So the first and foremost thing that I would encourage you to do is ask your principal and other avenues within your district about funds that might be available. So simply talking to them about what your end goal is. You could say like, I really want an iPad and a projector for my physical education classroom because there's all of these apps that I can use, and you can give them specific examples. And then you say how that is going to affect the students and the productivity in your classroom. A lot of times there's technology funds that are available within a school district. And it doesn't have to be like brand new stuff. Sometimes school districts like repurpose things that classroom teachers might have. And I don't want to say that we always want to use secondhand equipment, but sometimes one man's junk is another man's treasure. And so if you think about like if a classroom teacher gets a new iPad after 3 years, like heck yeah, we'll take an iPad that's 3 years old to be able to use in our physical education class. So one of the things that you need to remember is asking for inside funding is probably where you want to start, because the likelihood of getting a grant is going to be small. And so you don't want to put all that work and effort into it if the funds are really available for you to use in your own building or within your district. So let's say that that doesn't work. Well, then I encourage you to reach out to local businesses and potential partners. Oftentimes, companies have to donate so much money per year, especially at the end of the year. Everyone's trying to get their tax deductions. And so it's really important for you to even tell large companies that you're looking for something, that you want to increase the health and physical activity of your students. And so you need X, Y, or Z in order to do that. And people that have a mission around children's health might find that that would be a great place to donate. So again, asking. Some schools have really strong PTAs, and so PTAs will take grants from teachers. And so if you think that your school has a really strong PTA, maybe reach out to them, see if they're willing to fund something that you might have. But again, when you go to ask for something, you need to make sure that you have a clear picture of what the end goal is and what the expected outcomes are, how it's going to benefit you and your students within the classroom. So then, if all of this is not successful, that's when I would begin searching for a funding source that's a good fit. All right, now where do we even begin when we're thinking about applying for grants? So I would say there's different categories of grants that you can apply for. The first one really isn't a grant application. It's more of what we call crowdfunding sites. So these are sites that you can publicize to people. You can state your need and then people donate to you. Donors Choose is a really big one. Donors Choose is education specific. So only education people use it, teachers. And essentially what teachers do is they say, hey, I want to do this with my students in my classroom. I want to do this with students in my classroom, and then they post what they want to do, and then people that are really interested in that like look on DonorsChoose and they essentially pick what they want to donate to. One of the things about DonorsChoose is that sometimes they offer match opportunities, or companies are able to match within their certain criteria within DonorsChoose. So National Fitness Foundation has a PE Innovation Challenge that they have run, and this is an example of a company that is willing to match cool ideas for physical education through DonorsChoose. So a second type of crowdfunding site is called GoFundMe. So GoFundMe is not education specific, but you are able to go on and say, I need money for this, and then people can go on and fund you. Oftentimes, these types of asks are more personal, so like someone died and we need money for the funeral or for medical expenses or whatever. But essentially, you can also use it to get things for your classroom. ClassWish is another example of crowdfunding site. So you put your idea on, and then people are able to go on and donate. And then Adopt a Classroom is through ClassWish, and that's another example. So the second bucket, I would say, is physical education and physical activity specific grants. So there's lots of grants out there for physical activity and physical education. Michigan Shape has $1,000 grants that you can apply for. Active Schools has some grant resources. Action for Healthy Kids has up to $2,500 that you can apply for. Fuel Up to Play 60 is a little bit more controlled. It's up to $4,000 for physical activity plays and nutrition plays that you can do within your school for a year, but that grant you can apply for each year. Good Sports is another granting venue. They don't have a limit, but their suggestion is around $2,000. And then Kids in the Game is between $1,000 and $5,000. Then, because we're in physical education, there are grants that are actually education specific. So just because we're in physical education doesn't mean that we can only apply for physical activity and sport grants. I think that being able to apply for education grants is important. Like, we want to have the availability and access to do that. It's just important to understand that the type of message that you might give a foundation that's offering an educational grant might be a little different. So let's say that you wanted to apply for heart rate monitors. Your justification shouldn't be, oh, I want to make sure that my kids understand how to be moderate and vigorously active for a lifetime, and they know how to use heart rate monitors going forward. An education-specific grant isn't going to really care about that. However, if you talk about how cardiovascular fitness is highly correlated with academic achievement, and there's research out there that talks about the relationship between aerobic fitness and school absenteeism or academic achievement in general, and you frame it in that manner, and then you say, I want heart rate monitors so that we can monitor the amount of cardiovascular activities that are going on in our physical education class with the end goal of increasing cardiovascular fitness. Therefore, hopefully, their academic achievement will improve and they'll come to school more. That is a very different frame than just telling a grantor that, you know, you want to make your kids' lives better. So if you're looking at the education-specific grants, make sure, again, that end goal, that you frame your argument correctly. So just some examples of these are MEMIC Foundation, Joyce Foundation, and then the Charles Koch Foundation. So this slide talks about fundraising directories. So these are essentially websites that you can look for grant applications on. So Grants Alert, Get Ed Funding, eGrams, which is State of Michigan specific, and then like Spark PE Grant Finder. All of these places are going to help you find grants that are related to whatever it is that you want to get your grant on. So after you find your grant, then you have to begin planning and writing the grant. And it's important that you don't forget the big picture items that you need to know. So you need to know when the grant's due. Do you have to get it approved by your district before you can submit it? Maybe there's limitations or requirements on the funding source that you chose. It's important to look at everything that's included in the grant. You also need to know if it's a big grant. So are you talking, $5,000, which would probably be considered a small grant, or are you talking $150,000, which is a larger grant? If it's on the larger grant side, it's really important that you reach out to potential collaborators, because the likelihood of a teacher getting a huge $150,000 grant is probably going to be smaller than if you were to collaborate with a local college or university to essentially submit that grant application. So once you know where you're going to apply, then the real work begins, because you're going to go through a 5-step process to essentially write your grant and determine what that looks like to be able to write grants. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to define a need. So we talked about this already, but you want to provide context for your need. You want to have some type of numbers that are associated. You want to weave your numbers into the narrative to help engage the reader. So let's think about the health of kids. Like, we want to say, like, okay, well, we know that obesity is a big issue. Well, you want to be able to actually show that through local numbers. So you want to say, okay, Detroit kids are obese. Well, how do we know that? You want to cite specific numbers about Detroit kids' health. Okay? Well, how do we know where to find these local numbers? I gave you some websites of where you might be able to find some specific data in relation to Michigan. So the YRBS is called the Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance Data, and that's specifically for high school. So what you can do is you can click on the link, and then you can get Michigan-specific data, or you can get Detroit-specific data. And this is really looking at high schoolers, and there's data on everything that you can think of about health and physical activity of students. If you want specific state profiles, you can go to school health profiles, and it talks about the state, and it talks about like individual school districts' health profiles. National reports and info sheets you can also find on the CDC website. There are some high school and middle school results within that site, and then you can compare the state to the national data. The Shape of the Nation report is specifically about physical education in the United States. And so that's where you would go to learn about what the physical education requirements are, what the law is for Michigan or for other states. And then the last one is Michigan School Health Survey System. So this is looking at school surveys that are inputted into the Michigan system and how essentially their health status is of their students. So that's step 2. So you have to define a need, then you need to provide supporting evidence saying that that need is actually a need. Once you've identified the need, and you want to do your best to identify the root cause. So why is it that students aren't being physically active? Do they not have the opportunity to be physically active? Maybe the space isn't safe for them to be physically active. Maybe they don't like the activities that are being offered. Or if students aren't eating healthy, do they have access to healthy food? Or is there just a corner store where they can get hot Cheetos for an inexpensive price? Do they have options of fresh fruit and vegetables close to their home? Maybe it's that food that they have access to is too expensive. So there is bananas, there is apples, there is carrots and celery, but it's way too expensive for them to afford. Maybe they don't have time to eat healthy. All of these things are important to understand, and identifying the root cause of the issue is going to help you then make a decision about what you actually need to do for your grant. So the fourth step is about aligning goals. So once you've identified a need and supported it with evidence, then you really need to align the goals of the school and the program. So you want to make sure that you create goals and objectives that are clear and concise. A goal is a broad statement of what you wish to accomplish, whereas an objective is a step toward accomplishing that goal. So when you think about a goal, you want to think about the final impact or outcome that you wish to bring about. You should link back to your needs statement, and you want to use words such as decrease, deliver, develop, establish, improve, increase, produce, and provide. So an example would be, to decrease obesity among elementary children in Dearborn. Now, what is the objective? Well, an objective is a narrow, precise, tangible, concrete, and can be measured. So, an example of an objective for this goal would be by the end of the year, 90% of classroom teachers in Dearborn Elementary Schools will offer classroom physical activity breaks. You want to remember that your goals need to be SMART. So, S stands for specific, M stands for measurable, A stands for obtainable, R stands for realistic, and T stands for time-bound. You want to make sure that your objectives are in quantifiable terms, that it's of outcomes and not the process, so not what took place, but what was the outcome of it. Your object should really specify the result of the activity. They should identify the target audience or the community being served. And then it's really important that your objectives should be realistic and they should be capable of being accomplished within the grant period. So the fifth thing is about sharing vision. So every needs statement must conclude with a peek into the future, or what we would call your vision. You want to make sure that you're specific and as realistic as possible. So if you're requesting $5,000, you don't want to claim that you're going to entirely obliterate childhood obesity in your schools, because it's just not going to happen with $5,000. You need to make sure that you're making claims that are going to meet what you are actually asking for. So there's a couple of things on grant applications that I want to make sure that you don't overlook. First is about the budget. So your budget really needs to be specific and accurate. You're going to list out all of your items, the specific costs of each item. And it's really important that you don't guess or estimate on this, because that leads to not being able to run your grant as planned. You need to make sure that you price out everything. Get quotes from people. Make sure that you have the right costs. Don't forget to include shipping. Sometimes, we order big equipment, we forget to order shipping. That puts us $500 over our budget. So make sure that you have those things under check. The other thing that typically is overlooked is evaluation. So most grants are going to ask for some type of an evaluation. And it's really important that you make sure that you budget for this, especially in a bigger grant. So you want to include both process and outcome and impact evaluation plans. So process really focuses on program implementation, what occurred. The outcome focuses on your short-term and long-term changes that occurred. And then impact is a long-term sustained changes as a result of the program. So obviously, I have some experience in grant writing, but I think that it's important to also take tips from the experts. So if you're interested in more tips about grant writing, here's some websites for you that you can go to learn more. I did want to mention that there are grant programs that are run through the Division of Kinesiology, Health, and Sports Studies. And one of those is called Building Healthy Communities, Engaging Elementary Schools. This is really a comprehensive physical activity and health program that schools can apply for. It's only for elementary schools, but it's valued at around $6,000. And essentially what happens is, we can come in, we show that if you do these 6 components, your kids are going to be healthier, they're going to have better behaviors towards healthy activities. So they're going to participate in physical activity more, they're going to eat healthier foods. And we've also done research that shows that schools that participate in building healthy communities have higher levels of academic achievement. And we have found that also kids were able to reduce obesity while they were participating in the program. So that's the elementary program. If you're interested, talk to me in class if you have a school that you would be interested in applying. Those are going to be due in March. Another grant is for middle schools, and this is through Project Healthy Schools, still under the Building Healthy Community program, but it's the middle school component, and it really focuses on eating more fruits and vegetables, choosing less sugary beverages, eating less fast food and fatty foods, being active every day, and spending less time in front of the screen. So this application will probably be up in April. Maybe your school isn't ready for a full culture of change around health and physical activity. And if that's the case, then there's a program called Step Up for School Wellness that's valued at about $1,000. and you basically can choose what step you want to implement within your school, and then they give you $1,000 to help you do that. So these are just some examples of grants that we run in conjunction with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan that we offer to schools across the state of Michigan. The last thing that I wanted to mention is that recently, and I know that we talked about this in class, is that schools have a new accountability system that is called ESSA. And this, it's ESSA. And basically what it says is that schools are able to use funds for Title IV and professional development to be able to offer that for physical education and physical activity things. And so I think that this is important to be on your radar, because as schools have to, they have to complete health assessments that's dictated by the state, then they can include goals within their school improvement plans. And then those goals are essentially how they're going to be able to spend this funding, the ESSA funding, on physical activity. And so I think that it's really important that you understand that, because if you have the opportunity to serve on a committee within your school building where you're part of that like management and planning team, it would be really beneficial for you to do that. All right, I think that's it about grant funds. So hopefully that gives you a little head start on how to apply for grants and kind of a little bit about like where to find them and what should actually go in the grant. Thank you very much.